Hey, superachievers. For this episode, I'm interviewing Marcus Hunter-Neill, also known as Lady Portia Di'Monte. Marcus hails from Belfast, Northern Ireland, and works mostly in corporate leadership and personal development. He is co host of the Dating is Such a Drag podcast, pun intended, and has done a TEDx talk as Lady P titled The Little Drag That Could. All right. Welcome, Marcus. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, my goodness, thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
I'm very
Yes.
excited to hear what you have to share. I know. I'm so excited. So before we start, can you share a little bit of your story or your background with our
Surely.
listeners?
Well, it was a mild Wednesday morning. The sun was splitting through the trees, and my mother felt a pang. Yeah, so I have, it's great. I love doing stuff like this because my
Mhm,
background and my journey is so abstract to have got me to where I am. I've had
mhm,
to ebb and flow with everything in life. I am really severely dyslexic, so I really struggle to read,
mm,
write, and spell. But I've always had the power of communication, and I've always had a personality that I have been able to wing my way into situations and then figure out how it all works in the background. So
mhm.
I went to a real hippy dippy school. First of all, a German school where they were all about creativity and everything. And then they
Oh,
wanted
wow.
us. Then they discovered that I had dyslexia, and the school structure didn't cater
Mhm,
for it, because what they did was they filled you full of imagination and idea. It's the Steiner way of education, and then they cram in academia.
mhm,
But when they figured out that I had dyslexia and their way of teaching
mm,
was academia second, they realized I had to go back into regular school. So I went into back into a regular, like,
mm.
sort of mainstream school, which was a wonderful primary school, gave me the best grounding ever. The two teachers were so awesome, and they could see in me that, there was a bit of a show person, and they got me to audition for the school play. I didn't think I could audition for the school play because I couldn't read. I knew that I would love to be on stage, but I just knew that have to learn lines. They said, audition for it, and if you get it, we'll make your lines the homework. And they did. And even whenever I left school and I did performing
Oh,
arts, they would come to every show. They would come to every play I've been in. And during the lockdown, I did Zoom
oh.
drag bingos, and they patched in on those as well, so they did. So whenever I left school, so I had a terrible time, at school, because I've always been this flamboyantly fabulous. I've always been so incredibly secure in my own skin that I've never not been myself. So I've never been on a journey to find or discover myself.
Mm,
This is what I was like at 7. This is what I was like, possibly not
mhm.
between the ages of like 12 to 15, because I was, it was beaten out of me. But then whenever I left school,
Oh,
and the school that I was in was just, it was horrific. Like the secondary school I went to, I was like, I'm not learning anything. And I would go to the
oh.
teachers and I'd be like, can I learn this? And they'd be like, no. And this is pre the internet. So it's not like I could self teach myself. The
Mhm.
only access I had at that time were books, and I can't read, right? So I had no access
Oh,
to find out,
no.
like, where do I even get these audiobooks, because it just didn't exist. So once I left school, I went into
Yeah.
working in special needs because somebody had a very limiting belief as to what I could do. So when I went for my careers class, this our careers teacher was not the greatest at pushing people in careers. So to give an
Mhm.
example of the class that I was in, the majority of people in the class wanted to be unemployed so that they could just, like, on benefits or welfare government assisted. All the girls wanted to be pregnant
Wow.
so that they would get a house. There was a couple of people wanted
Mm.
to be like footballers. One person wanted to be a cleaner. That was his career. He wanted to be a cleaner in the local shopping center. Then somebody wanted to be a
Mm.
drug dealer, and he said, well, where would you get the money for your drugs? And he said, well, I would claim benefits, pretend I lost them, get the money for that, and then I would get my first round of drugs, and then that would be fine. So he actually said to him, well, to me that sounds like you've got a business brain. Would you not use that for a more credible job type thing? Great answer. really on the ball. You've got a
Yeah.
business brain. You've figured it out, but do something legal. So then he came to me,
Yeah.
and I've just explained to you the round of the class that. So then it comes to me, and I said, well, actually, I'm struggling a little bit. I don't know whether I want to be an actor, a teacher, an interior decorator, or a TV presenter. But that is kind of where I'm at. I'm at a careers class. You're the careers teacher.
Mhm.
Could you help me hone my skills, right? So he laughed
Yeah.
like horrific and threw his
Oh.
head back in the chair and his hands were on his stomach. And the whole class were
Oh.
like looking around at me. And I was like, I don't know why this is. And I was so embarrassed because I also had an awful time at school. So this was just like another, I shouldn't be like, I'm just totally in the wrong place. These are just not my people. So instead of going,
Yeah.
well, here is somebody that I can work with, he was like, here is something that I've never come across. So I'm going to
Yeah.
alienate this because it's not like let's work against it. So instead of going, kids, here is
Mhm.
actually how you plan out a career. Let's home in on where are your strengths. What are you good at? Do you even like wallpaper? Do you know anything about interiors? It was like you're just stupid because you have dreams. And his words
Oh.
were, people like you need to have realistic expectations in life. So what is it that you want to do? And I was like,
Oh.
maybe work in special needs. So I ended up working in special needs, which was an amazing gift because then my mum worked in special
Mhm.
needs and I learned how to communicate with everybody on every spectrum. So then whenever I left there and I
Mhm.
went into performing arts, and then from that I moved into cosmetics, and I was the first ever male working on a cosmetics counter. And then I went very quickly from part-time to
Mm.
like full-time to doing all of the training around the UK and Ireland. And I worked for Benefit Cosmetics, and they had this slogan for all the staff. It was like, it's the benefit way of working. So the benefit way of doing this, the benefit way of doing that. And then
Mhm.
they changed it slightly to, there is the benefit way and then there's the Marcus way. And if you can do it the Marcus way, we don't quite know what the Marcus way is. And that, honest, at that time, I didn't quite know what the Marcus way was as well. But whenever I took over running accounts and stores, they were like ridiculously successful. And all the girls on my team just
Wow.
flew and got promoted and did amazing jobs, and still to this day, and I see some of them now and they still credit their work ethic to that. So then I didn't quite know what that was that I had
Mhm.
done. And then I worked for 10 years running a cosmetics cancer charity. And then I went from that, and in between doing that I was
Wow.
buying and selling houses. These are all things that I didn't need to really be able to read or write. I just had to know how to talk and then make people buy into whatever it was I was either selling or doing. And the main thing that I always taught the girls was, don't ever sell
Mhm.
anybody anything that doesn't suit them, because they'll never come back. Make them
Yeah.
feel $1 million, and they will
Mm.
come back every time, because they'll buy that experience that, this person genuinely cares. And they're not just, they've
Absolutely.
got blue eyeshadow and they're selling the blue eyeshadow because they've got an overstock of it. And whenever we had like key things like that, I always said to the girls, if it suits them, sell it. If it doesn't, don't. But I've kind of worked that mantra
Yeah.
in, it's always the other person front and center. So for 20 years, 23 years now, I've been working as a drag queen. So that has always been the front and center of, people have always been the front and center. Then I moved from that into working in the BBC, where even with very limited education, I managed to get in through the back door. And I just thought, if
Mhm.
they see me, all they need is to see me, because once they see me, they'll get it. And that's exactly what happened. So I was dressed to impress,
Yeah.
and this is you
Aw.
who you are and who you show up as is who people are buying and seeing. So if you're somebody that people go, "Oh
Mhm.
my God, who is that?" Like, and I'm dressed like little Lord Fauntleroy. You know what I mean? I had cravats and, like blazers and waistcoats and all, but that's just how I dress anyway. And I'm in this striped top because
Mhm.
spring, summer I do
Yeah.
nautical, autumn, winter I do country gent, right? It's just, it works, and then I never have to think. But
Yeah.
it's a difference between style and fashion. I would be stylish, but my style will never go out of fashion because it always works for me. So all of these
Mm-hmm.
little things that were happening that people were going, who is this person? Do I need to know who they are? And there was times I was working on shows, even just as a runner, and the guests thought I was the presenter and asked the presenter to make them tea. And I was like, I'm not the presenter. Why do you think the presenter would be doing all the booking and organizing? And yeah. So I moved from that. So I
You're
know.
just multi-talented.
So I moved from that, and then I started working in leadership and personal development and branding, and I worked with some really big companies because they liked what I had done on other events. They'd seen me work on other events, and then a company called Create Express were like, "We want you to come and do lots of work for us." So that more work came from that, and that's how I progressed up that ladder. And then obviously self education, I have done an awful lot from I've left school, because I can do it at my own pace and within my own skill set, so audio or visual or whatever. And then it wasn't really until
Mm-hmm.
the last sort of maybe 7 or 8 years then, and I always was aware of, like, there's the Marcus way versus the benefit way, and what was that, and why were my teams always so successful, and what
Mm-hmm.
is it whenever I'm speaking to people that I'm doing that's making a shift in them. And I never really put the pieces together because I never really sat down and thought about it, because when you're in your own world and your own life, it just happens. So, like my
Yeah.
dad, I made a documentary about my dad when
Yes.
I worked in the BBC, because he was the head of physical education in a prison called the Meyers prison, which held all the political prisoners in Northern
Mm.
Ireland during the Troubles, and it was the most
Oh,
dangerous prison
wow.
in Europe. But when I had explained to him that I wanted to make this
Wow.
documentary about him, because long story short, he left there, it closed because of the peace process. He went to Africa, was working out there with the UN, got malaria, almost died. While he's on his life support, both sides of the
Wow.
community, Catholic and Protestant, reached out to mum to say if he needed any help then. So that made me think, well, what did he
Mm.
do that made both sides reach out? So that's kind of where the
Yeah.
documentary came from. When I explained this to him, that I wanted, and he was like, "Why would you want to make a documentary about me?" And I was like, "Because you don't get it. So we don't get and understand our lives because we live it." The wonderful thing is if you can reflect back and go, "Well, what were the
Yeah.
steps that this?" Then that's how you progress it forward. So I've done so much work around neuroplasticity and cognitive behavior, and how do we recreate
Mm.
things. And I
Mm-hmm.
used to be a lot heavier, and I could never lose weight. And then I figured out the science of why I wasn't losing weight. And once I understood the science of it, then
Mm.
once I understand the science of anything, I get it. It's when people go, you do this, you do that, you do the other, but
Mm-hmm.
why am I doing that? Tell me why I'm doing it. Then I'll figure it out. So,
The why.
for
Yeah.
example, for every 5 grams of carbohydrate you take, your body turns that into 5 grams of sugar. Sugar is an energy and your body stores it. So actually, when
Mm-hmm.
that whole low carb thing, the science behind that is it turns into sugar and it stores in your body, goes back to Neanderthal days. So once I figured out how the
Yeah.
brain works and neuro pathways and quantum physics, and how all of that
Mm-hmm.
is becoming a science, and how all that is coming in. So it's really easy to reprogram your brain. It's just very difficult thing to do. It's easy to do it. It's a difficult thing to actually put through,
Yeah.
because our brains, and the science behind it is, our brains
Mm-hmm.
does everything in its power to keep us safe. If our brains could keep us in a cave in a darkened room,
Mm-hmm.
it would be like, we've done it. No threat. We're fine. We're surrounded
Yes.
by.
Done.
But then we change something. We get up and we go and
Uh-huh.
we go, oh, what's this? We don't want to do that. So that is why it is so difficult to
Ooh.
create
Yeah.
change. It's so difficult to go on that diet or start the new job or write the book or do whatever, because our brain says, don't do that right now. It makes a deal with us, and it says,
Yeah.
tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes whenever it comes to the brain. But what happens is,
Tomorrow.
when you get to 11 o'clock and you've had your 11s and you've realized that you had a snack, that you were meant to be on a diet, and you go, oh, right, I'll start tomorrow. When your
Mm-hmm.
when your brain makes that connection and goes, great, whatever the new change is that we're saying we'll do that tomorrow, it releases these amazing dopamines and endorphins that rushes through your body, the same like if you had a cigarette
Mm-hmm.
or someone that takes drugs gets that high. And then you go, great, I'm
Absolutely. Yeah.
relaxed. So I can continue on throughout my day. Then, whenever it comes to tomorrow and I'm meant to be starting the diet and you're going to bed and you're like, diet's going to start tomorrow, this is going to be great. Then you wake up and it does something, your brain does something somewhere to make you go, no, let's do it tomorrow. And then a week passes, a month
Mm-hmm.
passes, a year passes, 5 years
Yep.
passes, and you haven't even lost a pound. So when you figured that out and you know how to
Yeah.
counterbalance that with familiarity, once your brain, it just likes familiarity. The key thing about your brain is that
Yeah.
it does not know the difference between a good thought, a negative thought, or an in between thought, right? It's data that we're giving it.
Yeah.
So our brain is our
Yeah.
best and our worst friend at exactly the same time. If I type something into a
Isn't
computer
that
and
fascinating?
I'm typing, a lovely love message and oh, I love you so much, and peace, love, and sit on a rock and cross your leg and namaste, girl. And then in the next picture I send could be like a very negative political thing where I'm trying to get people to fall on board for some kind of like hate speech. The computer just sends out both images. It doesn't know that this one's good and one's bad, and our brain's exactly the
Yeah.
same. So when our brain is wired and the familiarity and the safety of familiarity is this negative mindset, then it keeps us in it. And then you've got the law of attraction and
Yes.
quantum physics, and the vibration that we're putting out is this negative connotation that this is not going to work out. Nothing's good for me. I'm fat. I'm ugly. I'm stupid. I never get the right guy. I never get the right girl. I hate my job. Everybody hates me. Then this is all the energy that you're putting out in the world, and then this is what you're sucking back in. So in my coaching
Yeah.
work and the work that I do as a coach, not
Absolutely.
only do I work on the individual as a normal coach would do, my big thing is that I get them into high frequency meditations and changing their. So even when I'm coaching someone, I have high vibrational frequency music playing in the background because without them even realizing, I'm tweaking their frequency that
Mm.
they are putting out, and then they jump on the bed and then they become superhuman. And the results of stuff that I have got with my
Mm.
clients through that is like the only way you can say it is magic, but there's a science behind it. But for the ordinary everyday person, it
Mm.
is it is a magic. So we are trained in this negative thought process,
Yeah.
and it's in there and it's in there, and then we don't get out of it. As soon as we shift to like a positive and a more friendly way of speaking about ourselves, then that's our familiar brain waves and patterns and the new pathways that we've created. So our brain just stays in that. Our brains completely forget that we had negative ones because it's familiar
Yeah.
in the good and the new. So it stays there. So it's
Yeah.
very, it's
Well,
very,
how do
it's
we
it's
disrupt
e-
it?
it's easy and it's not at the same time. The easiest way to do it is just to
Mm-hmm.
constant, like it's a really like anything. If I went to the gym and I wanted a six pack, I would have to do sit ups and pull ups and diet and work on put in the work. So you've got to
Got
stay
to put in the
conscious
work.
of your thoughts. Now,
Yeah.
your thoughts naturally drift, but when you
Mm.
become cognitive of you're
Yes, they
trying to
do.
change your thoughts, just like I could accidentally eat the snack at the buffet table and then realize I'm on a diet and then only eat half of it because I've just remembered that I'm on a diet. So that's fine. You put it back down, you go, that's great. I'll go
Mm.
to the salad part. Grand. You've made the change. It's the same with your thoughts. When the negative things start to come in, you start to change them. And when a good nighttime
Mm-hmm.
and morning routine is the best way to completely recalibrate your way of thinking because you're falling asleep
Mm.
thinking in a positive and a good habit formation. Then whenever your brain recalibrates everything that went through the day,
Mm-hmm.
the strongest wave pattern that has just happened is the last stuff that you've been thinking about. Then whenever you wake up and you stay in that vibration, you stay in that thought process of I'm grateful for the life that I have. I'm grateful for this bed that I am in. I love the life that I'm
Mm.
living. I even though my partner snores, I love the fact that I have someone next to me. Or if you're like me, I'm single and I'm like, I love that I can starfish in my own bed. So what I've got. So
Be
then
grateful
your
for
brain
whatever,
goes,
right?
oh,
Yeah.
this is our formatting. So this is our formatting. Then throughout the
Mm.
day, whenever you hear the
Yeah.
negativity starting to come in, you clock it and then you change it. And what I always tell people to do is, say, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you and I were chatting in this here, and then negative thoughts start coming in. I could just literally change my screen to something else, look at something else, come back to whatever we are talking
Mm-hmm.
about. But then you don't realize that I have done something different. But I have purposely, every time a negative thought has come in, I have done something that has interrupted my thought process. So should that be getting up and even just walking over to the corner of the room and looking out the window and opening the window and closing it again, you've done something that's so
Yeah.
random that your brain goes, I don't know what this is, but then you go back to thinking about something better.
Yeah.
And then that completely
What?
it completely interrupts it. So
Uh-huh.
that's how you then get into the frequency of that. That's kind of the long and short of it. But it's been, yeah, and I try to make everything
Yeah.
as
I
easy as
love that.
possible for people to understand, because the thing is, I've come from a background where I have had to figure it all out for myself, and people speak to you like you're an expert. And,
Yeah.
I don't know the whole ins and outs, but I do know how to tell people, in an easy way that's going to be palatable for the average everyday person, because knowledge is power. Sometimes people can stand up and give this huge
Yeah.
lecture at a university and everyone goes, oh yes, I get that and I'll write that down. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck they're saying. Do you know what I mean? I have no idea what how do how no.
Well, knowledge does
Yes.
not equal
So then what I
understanding,
try to
right? You
do is like
understand
filter
it,
that
which is
down to
nice.
everyone, because
Yeah.
why how amazing would it be, because it's like a ripple effect. Once everyone's on the same page and people are living in a state of
Mm-hmm.
happiness and joy. And I get that life happens to people.
Yeah.
But here is a great example of, I do like vision boarding and things, but my main work is life as a life strategist, right? So here I am, I want this dream life and the dream
Mm-hmm.
house and the dream whatever. And then people are like, if I stick it on a postcard in the spare bedroom and I look at it, that's all I need to do. That is like, that's the smallest percentage, because you kind of then have to work backwards. So you're here and you're unemployed and you want the dream house in Malibu. How are we getting from A to W in like two moves, right? So you kind of have to figure out who you need to become and who you are
Yeah.
to do what you need to do. What's the path that you need to take? Who do you need to
Mm.
meet? Who do you need to become? What job do you need to get? What alignment do you need to have? How do you spot the people who are, because the universe will start to throw the right people in your way. You need to identify and clock it and go, right, this person, it was
Mm-hmm.
so strange. I was talking about opening a hairdresser's, and this guy just came that I hadn't seen from school for years, and he came round the corner and he said, oh my God, Julie, what about you? I heard you want to do hairdressing. I have a wee unit
Mm-hmm.
that, the hairdresser came in for 2 weeks, left. I don't know where they are. If you want the lease, it's yours. Oh, right, okay. Yeah, so there you are, Julie. That out of nowhere,
Wow. There
here's
you
this.
go.
So clocking things like that. Another way of keeping your brain in the right habit formation is when stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
happens, saying thank you, going, thank you, universe, thank you, whoever. And then your brain goes,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this
Gratitude.
is positive reinforcement as
Yeah.
to this is what we're looking for. We need to
Mm.
find more of this. And it works the opposite way. If you live in a state of, I never have enough,
Yeah.
this is terrible, life is terrible, guess what? Life is going to be terrible. And when a terrible things happen, you go, see what I said? That's why my life is so
Yep.
terrible. So I had done this thing where I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to um, own a luxury car outright, and I wanted to be flown around the world
Mm-hmm.
and as myself, and I just wanted to be booked for me to be me doing me, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I've worked across so many fields in my life that I get
Mm-hmm.
calls quite regularly. So it was coming up to um Christmas, and I thought, I'm going to buy myself. I had this opportunity again out of nowhere to buy a Land Rover, a Vogue outright, and I was like, I'm doing it. The money is in the bank. Let's get it done, dusted. But with Brexit and
Wow.
everything like that over here, it took ages for it to arrive. And then when it did arrive, it was in a backlog of getting checks and everything. So
Yeah.
It didn't arrive until shortly after my 40th
Oh.
birthday. But in from just before my 40th birthday and then a couple of weeks after that, I got booked for San Francisco, where I was to go over and be me and give a talk and do everything on the work that I was doing here. Then I was booked for London to work on an event. Then taking that event from London to London to Toronto, and then I went 2 weeks later from there from
Mhm.
London to from Belfast to London for me to do another diversity and inclusion event that and in person that I'd all done online. So here in
Mhm.
the space of a window, my car came out right,
There you
and I
go.
had 5 trips booked and for just me being me, because pre that I had always been,
Wow.
it was had been a sales company or somebody wanted me to go and make the money, or if I didn't make enough money, then my trip wasn't good enough for them. Whereas here the alignment just came up, and when you
Mhm.
work on divine timing, there is no time limit, so you just kind of have to put it out there and be like, it'll come whenever
Mm.
it's ready. It's like cooking a baby. You've got a rough idea that it's going to
Yeah.
come around this stage. Could come a month early, 2 weeks early. It could be two, yeah. And then whenever that
Mhm.
happens, it's ready to
Comes
rock
when
and
it
roll. So
comes.
that's kind of how it works. And then I went, here is exactly what I'd
It's
written up on
proof
my
right
board.
there.
It was
Yeah.
18 months from thinking about it to it actually coming. But here, this is right in front of me, and everything I was booked for me to be me, no other reason. So that is kind of so a lot of the so I do a lot of work in and around
Mhm.
that, and I explain to people this is what you do. Like, it is this. My tagline is change your thoughts, change your vibes to change your life, because
Absolutely.
that's it. There's no.
So,
Oh, sorry. Yes.
oh yeah, yeah. So with you mentioned the work. So what are some of your products and services for our listeners?
So my
Speaking of your work.
products and services are, people can Zoom with me, which is great.
Mhm.
If you
Mm.
live in Northern Ireland, you can come for treatments as well. I also do the guided meditations for people um, over the if I'm working with them on Zoom. What I
Mhm.
do here is they will be wrapped in a weighted blanket. Obviously I can't do a
Oh.
weighted blanket with if they're on Zoom.
Yeah.
But that's one of the differences. I'm currently just finishing off a free handout for people. So if anybody wants this, if they want to contact me, I will happily send it out to them. And it's a 20-page guide on literally just how to make it make that all happen.
Mhm.
I don't know. Is that me or you?
It's not me.
Oh, I I apologize. So
No
it's
worries.
like it's a 20-page guide on basically just how you make it all happen, from your
Oh,
morning
nice.
routine to your thought processes, and I'm giving it away for free. And it's
Well,
not a funnel. It's not like a here's this little
yeah.
tidbit and then here's a 10,000 pound program. I'm just going, do you know what? Here is, in a summary, if you do nothing else, this is enough to make great change in your life, and it's my gift to the world.
Oh. And so either through Instagram or LinkedIn people can contact you?
Yes, they can get me there, and I'm literally, believe it or not, the only Marcus Hunter-Neill in the world. So, and Neil is spelled
That's awesome. You are truly
Neil.
unique.
Yes,
We'll make sure and put that in the show notes. Cool.
yes, thank you.
So I hate to ask because we're towards the end.
Yeah,
I mean I don't hate to ask the question. I hate that it's ending.
yes.
Um, but what is your final piece of advice for our listeners?
My final piece of advice is give yourself a break, okay? Because
Mm,
you're doing the best that you can do with the knowledge that you have, and build on your strengths and what you can physically do and achieve. We put ourselves under so much pressure to do
yeah.
so much because we think other people can do this, or this is what other people expect. If you
Yeah.
start falling in love with yourself, this is one of the big
Mm,
things. This is the first thing that I teach in any of my things, is how to wholeheartedly fall in love with yourself first
yeah.
and be your own wingman. So when you give yourself a break, life becomes so much bigger, so much
Mm,
easier, and then all the BS from everybody else, it just kind of like dissipates,
yeah.
like mist in the air.
Oh, I love it. Oh, and thank you so much for spending your time with us today,
Oh my
Marcus.
goodness!
This has
Thank you for
been
having me.
amazing. Yeah.
So
If you'd like to learn more about Marcus Hunter-Neill, connect with him on LinkedIn.